the reason I'm talking to you guys because it's a conference. The goal is how do we engage second generation into temple related activities. And this is not just Gayatri Pariwar. Gayatri Pariwar is playing a leading role. It is about bringing all temples from all sects and all organizations together, and I'll walk you through. So, history of it, there was a brainstorming session in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in Pennsylvania, and I believe that is Tripathi there in that. And Puja Swami Dayananda and Muniji and few other spiritual masters. So the seeds of this conference were sown in there, saying that there is a need for this, need for bringing all the temple executives together in a brainstorming session to discuss what can we do to sustain our dharma, our Sanskriti, and pass it over to the next generation, and so forth. So can you go to the next? So again, you see Dr. Sahib has been playing a very active role in guiding this conference, among with other masters, Puja Swami Dayanandji, Tejo Mayanandji, Sri Ravi Shankarji, and many, many, many more. Can you go to the next? So, it's guided by Dharma Gurus, it's run by temple executives. Vishwa Hindu Parishad is playing the role of networking all of them together. And the need here that was defined is that for nourishing the banyan tree of Hindu Dharma or our Sanskriti, which we Gurudev says, right? Sanskriti raksha kaun karega, hum karenge, hum karenge. And the goal here, right, that we need to strongly focus on the need of the second generation and the larger, and when you say US, it's a North American society. We all are raised in this, majority of are citizens of this country, and it is our duty not only to share our value with only us, but with the larger community also. So what turned out to be the two major challenges. One of them was sustenance. Right? If you look at, and I have traveled to over 100 plus temples now under this. One thing we see very, very common, and you will see that in Gayatri Pariwar also, except few spots, very few places you see second generation playing leading role in terms of decision making, education. Right? So it's sustenance and leadership. How do we pass this great tradition to the generation that is being brought up in these countries? Right? And one of the questions that we ask, imagine yourself like what you did, right, at the time of retirement. 20 years from now, where most trustees are retired. And majority of the trustees have even failed to have their own generation join the temple activities, and that is across the board, right? So what can be done? And so it was identified that there are three pillars as a solution here. One of them is network, right? You network all the temples, learn good practices, share practices from each other, and make sure that Shraddha is increased, so you do not talk down on each other. You appreciate them, and it's a collective effort, right? Everybody has right to be different. All traditions are beautiful, and also to think what legacy we are going to leave behind. 200 years down the road, when a history is written, what message do we want to leave for this society? That did Indians, when they came, did they bring Rajkarma? Did they bring samosa? Or did they bring a way of life that is very compassionate and a many, many good practices, right? So how do we do that, right? So if temples, right now, majority of the temples have only one focus, and that is worship. But temples in ancient times were also development of culture. All this Bharatnatyam and Kathak and all the dances you see were originated from temple. A lot of paintings, a lot of architect were based on temple. And like what Dr. said, right? Shiksha nahi vidya bhi. Right? Temples were the lighthouse for vidya, spiritual wisdom, knowledge, and seva, which is what we call aradhana, right? Self-serving There is the other. So how do we engage temples into the other three also? We started in 2005, and we had 50 temples came together in Atlanta. And that was mainly a brainstorming type. Now in 2008, right, we had more cross-functional things, a lot of issues started showing up. 2011, right, we started strengthening the network, and we had a lot of networks and that I talked about how are now taking into active role. And then the next step, I will also talk about that we need to influence the policies at governmental level, working with each other level. Like many Christian churches and things like that, we see that very uniform policy level impact, right? If somebody has done something not right to them, right, everybody comes together, stand up together. We don't do that. So can you go to the next? So this is just a history of how many states and temples from different states that we've been able to come together. And this year, HMEC is in Canada, and we have a lot of youth from here in Canada, and we do need your support as a volunteer, also as a participant. This is done for you guys. Can you go next? So as the outcome of HMECs in past, we have also done some books, and these books were not done by one temple. This was done by a committee of experts from many, many temples. And in fact, the first two books, our Karmaka and Bhaskar, become the basis for those two books. And they were written in contemporary English for generation in US and Canada. The third one is a prayer book. So one thing that we found, temples and our organizations, we are not involved with hospitals, right? We don't do seva. Yeah, if you are sick, you go to if you're in a hospital or if your baby is born, you will see all other people with religious backgrounds will come and say, we want to baptize you, can we do prayers for you, things of that nature. We don't do that. So we are encouraging temples to start doing that. We need to have volunteer days to do that. For that, we need a book. We have a very large number of Hindu nurses and doctors. And by this project, we are making books available in many, many of the hospitals. So if a patient needs that, they can use these basic things, or any nurse can go and do prayers for them. And our prayers have a lot of values for even a lot of others, because our prayers are very universal prayers, right? So that is one of the projects that we started. And one of the key thing is that by having this conference, we are enhancing communication between temples and temple trustees and executives. And these are just few of the quotes, so can you go to the next? So few things happened, and you will see some familiar faces here too. One of the things that happened is Chai, or a coalition of Hindu youth. So it's within Gayatri Pariwar, we have a youth network that we see here, right? And every temple has that. And when they all start talking to each other, then a lot of beautiful things happen. And in fact, in the young generation, there are much less barriers than the older generation in terms of working together for a common goal. So you see here, I think there is Durva there, maybe Sefali may be there too, they were there, Bhavesh is there in one of them, Mitesh is there on the bottom one. So Garima has attended one, Viral has attended one, few people have attended these conferences. So that was one thing. Another thing that happened is Bal Vihar network. Right? Within Gayatri Pariwar, we are trying to do the same also. That we have many different groups trying to do Bal Sanskar Shalas, and when they start sharing material, it helps each other. And we have started doing that across the temples also. There are a lot of common teachings, right, that can be shared by everybody. So that activity has started now. We have 2 conferences already on that side. Can you go to the next? Another thing we started is what we call a National Seva Divas. around 9/11 and Gandhi Jayanti. And one of the purpose there was, we do seva individually, but we have no collective record of seva as Hindu. And a classic example, there were Hindu refugees coming from Bhutan refugees, right? They were being brought into US and Canada. Not a single Hindu organized qualified to bring them here, because we have no track record of seva in government. So one of the doctors from Washington DC area came up with this idea, and he took the lead. So last year we did common seva in 80 temples together. Blood donation camps in 80 temples together, right? And the report went to White House. And same thing we want to do in Canada. That we do things together, let's do things together, right? And there are many activities of that nature are starting out of this. Can I go to the next? Another thing started is Havan. We have a lot of Vanaprasthis, right? And Gurudev also, and if you listen to Gurudev's lectures, he has talked about, which you guys may not relate, but the older generation will. That when your kids are through college and settled, give your time. We have a very large number of people retiring in US and in Canada, and more in US. If we can tap them and then bring them to temple and make them ambassadors for the temple, they will be much more better facilitator or communicator with the young generation, because they have been in this country for many years and they are raising grandchildren, as well as interface to the outside world, which is the non-Hindu community, which has a lot of interest in our values. In fact, there is 10% of the total US population is influenced by yoga and vegetarian concepts now, right? But there is nobody there to feed them with the right values. You bring them to the temple, and a priest who is not trained will say, oh, we have monkey god, right? And things of that nature, which doesn't carry any value to the. So that has started, and it's called Havan now, and there are a few conferences that have already taken place. We are slowly trying to build. Can you go to the next? Another thing we started is priest, and Dr. Sir gave this a very nice name. In fact, training of trainers, he called this concept before he did the Yosemite camp. So this title he gave for in 2009 or 2010. He said, we must train the priest. Priest must know English. Priest must know how to communicate with the younger generation. It's not just that do this, do that, do this, and swaha, done. And priest also should be able to do the temple management activities. And so the whole theme here, right, and I think it is Gurudev's wish that a lot of things are happening here, but what I see here, that within 5 years, a lot of D.S.V. students probably are going to come here and going to start playing active role in a lot of this temple management. We already have there the Dharma Tantra division there, and a lot of those kids are graduating from there who probably will play a role here. So what happened is priest conference started, and a lot of other things showed up too from priest side. The priests, most of the priests are treated by temples like slaves. They work seven days a week. Right? They are the money maker for the, and the people who hire them are not qualified. The committee members, most committee members has no clue in terms of what a puja is or why it is done. And they are the one who interviews the priest and bring them here, right? So a lot of things regarding the priest also is not taken care of. The classic example of there is a very progressive temple in Minnesota, Dr. Sane's temple. So they train their priests. They in front of every priest has an iPad there with slokas, and they know how to project things, they know how to play things. And when they give a presentation, it inspired a lot of other temples, at least the progressive temples, right? So a lot of new concepts are coming here. So can you go to the next? I think it's probably, yeah, one more. One more. Right, so this was just a history that we started in Atlanta 2006. 2007 was New York, New Jersey, New York. That's where I got first time involved. And then 2008 we were in Michigan, and that's when I think we had Parth and Sefali and Mitesh came. Then we were in Maryland and Shivi gave a talk there, Shivi Chandra from Gayatri Pariwar. Then we went to Texas and Garima and Miral were there. Then in Ohio, Bhavesh and few other kids were there. I think the Chicago people also came. California, Rohan came. This year it's in Canada and like at least the youth from Canada to come and help. Can you go to next? So the whole theme that is emerging, and this is just an example that we share with every temple we go to. That I'm not sure which Olympic that was, right? But the men's relay team failed to reach the Olympic final for the first time. And what happened is one of the player dropped the baton, right? Yeah. And he said, I know it's my job to get the baton, and I didn't do that, right? So you have to pass the baton the right way and the right time or lose the race. And what we tell to all temple executives by means of these samples that the young generation, time is now, and if we miss it, we are gonna miss out. These beautiful structures that we built will go on sale in 20 years if we don't engage the young generation. Right? Can you go to next? And so again, by this we say that yes, it's not easy to pass on the baton, but it has to be done. So the reason I share this with you, I need input from you. What should we do? What can we do? What kind of things we need to cover in this conference? This is a conference that is run in a very professional way, like we do technical conferences. There are close to 70 talks. Every talk is 12 minutes with 3 minutes of question answers. And many topics that we cover includes interfaith marriages, training of priests, youth empowerment, right? Seva. Other thing started here is chaplainship. That we don't have Hindu chaplains, and we have started now a program to certify Hindu chaplains. And in fact, Yale University now has Hindu chaplain. Princeton has a Hindu chaplain too. And hopefully that will spread, and then we'll have a lot more Hindu chaplains at the university. So I really would like your input, and that's why I asked for a time here. In terms of what should we do, how do we improve this conference, or what kind of topics we should include in this, or what can we do to have youth participate?
I think one of the things that I find is, along with training the priests, the executive people, the trustees, they probably also need to be, trained somehow.
Yes, so there is no doubt, right? The question comes down to be how, right? And as Gurudev says, that you inspire them, right? And that is the whole purpose of having this conference, where the trustees see some other people doing good things and they get inspired. Or at least when the younger generation propose something they've seen happening somewhere else, the barrier is reduced. Like, you cannot otherwise train trustees. You cannot train anybody who is not willing to get trained, right? So you have to inspire them to get trained, and that is what. And by the way, this reminds me of another thing also. I've been working with this Vishwavidyalaya Parishad group. It's only 5 to 7 people who are making this happen. All these activities. They spend 6 to 8 months of their time. They all are working people, but when they come home, they are on this. And that reminds me of Sangathan, right? That Gurudev used to say that Sangathan, even a small assembly of like-minded people can do miracles, right? And he used to give example of the decades, 20 of so bad guys in India used to control the entire district and the elections of the districts. And he used to say that all of you guys are bheed, right? Bheed means a large assembly, but assembled, right? Not united. So, and I think youth probably has a much easier way to work unitedly than our generation. So,
Something that I've noticed to be a barrier for myself maybe also is that a lot of times when Hinduism is presented to the second generation,
publisher of a magazine. These are all American Swamis, Americans who embrace Hinduism and become Swamis, and they publish a magazine called Hinduism Today. So in US, there are a lot of misconceptions and misrepresentation of Hinduism in the textbooks, especially California, Texas, and few other states. And they took up a big fight, and they have provided supplements, right? And those supplements are on their website. It's just that awareness is not created, and very, very few people know. But very beautiful supplements about our festivals, about our basic religious values, and our history. To the point where 6th, 7th, 8th graders can understand. In the same form like what you have the big history book, and exactly same format. So go visit Hinduism Today website and give us feedback.
I think one of the topics that we did in the 2-day shiva was role of youth in the West, and which is a very broad topic, but I think some of the questions that people raised were how to identify yourself because you're living in America or Canada and you're amongst friends that are Christian Catholic, yet your roots are Hinduism, and when you go back home you have Hinduism prevailing in your house. And there were some people were kind of confused about one, like what is their identity? Are they American because they're born here, or are they Indian because that's what their roots
I
are?
think why can it not be a very proud Hindu Canadian or a very proud Hindu American?
Yeah, I think that's what one of the
Right, but that happens only when you understand Hinduism and the values that you understand, and not only understand, you can explain to others, right? And I think one of the things we as Hindus do is we don't pay much attention on education. If a Jewish or a Christian person moves from here to India, and that is also happening, right? They are not ashamed of, because they have been taught what the values are, right? If somebody asks them, and one of the issue we have, right, most other Abrahamic religions are based on one book, right, whether it's Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. They only have one book, right, may that be Bible, Torah, or Quran. We have a library, we don't have one book. So, and then we are free to choose our own mode of worship, and that's where a lot of confusion also happens. And our generation was not trained, right? We learned by association, not by professional training. Right? There was no Bal Sanskar Shala available to us. You guys know more about Hinduism at your age than we did at our age, even though we were raised in India. Yeah.
What about the curriculum in the schools? Do we have, can we influence that to add?
We are, so that's one of the things this conference is doing, right? It's bringing like-minded people together. And they are taking up systematic fights. So there is another group that is involved with us, is called Hindu American Foundation, HAF. And that's all second generation Hindus from this country, all doctors' wives. And they are doing the liaison work in Washington. Again, a small group of people, but doing great jobs. And they also are working on human rights side, on Hindu abuses and things like that. Yeah.
I think one of the big wins here is going to be you just mentioned mentioned it, that we have our own, even though we're all kind of trying to achieve perfection, or trying to get these good qualities and incorporate them into our lives, we all have different modes of getting to it. And so, maybe not aligning them, but at least showing that we're all going after the same thing, just in different ways. And when we get all this, even I live with two other Gujarati guys that they worship Swami Narayan and stuff, and they're always like, well, we're better, blah, blah, blah. And it's not that anyone's better, it's just that there's a different mode, right? And it's just, and just getting people to understand that, I think this is going to go a long way in doing that.
So what you just mentioned, right, that's a sampradaya, right? And sampradaya means very, that they have very firm belief, right? So it's become more like an organized religion. It's only my way or no other way, right? And Gurudev's vision, and in fact Gurudev has written many places, sampradaya ki tute diwar, right? So when Dr. Saib asked me to work on this, right, there were two things that emerged, and that's why I got involved. One of them is sampradaya ki tute diwar. Means you break down the barriers between sampradayas. And Gurudev's vision, if you read his books and things like that, even between religions, those things are gonna break down, and that's why he said 21st century is the century of scientific religion will become the religion, scientific spirituality will become the religion of 21st century. And there is an audiobook that we created, and Gurudev very specifically even says that one day, and I think Dr. Sahib is sharing everything openly with you, right? How, what greater level of changes are taking place in next 15 to 20 years, right? But Gurudev's vision is that the day is going to come where in the morning you are going to go to the church, afternoon you may go to a Hindu temple, and in the evening you may go to some other. Because the essence of all this religion will start flowing, and at that time all these dogmas and everything is going to drop. So another thing, right? So one was Sampradayaki Kutedivar, and giving an example. If you know a Swaminarayan, your friend with Swaminarayan sect, right? He will not even go to another Swaminarayan temple, right? And there are 12 or so different Swaminarayan sects. But in this conference we bring 5 or 6 of them. Right? So at least they start sitting together. And then the other thing Gurudev used to say, right, and in fact Gurudev has written books on, there is a book called Mandir Jan Jagran ke Kendra Bane. Means temple needs to become lighthouse for the society. Right? It just cannot be mere place of worship. A lot of those themes are emerging out of these conferences, that why temples cannot do this, why cannot they do this. And of course when people hear first reaction, oh yeah, it's good, but then you need to have enough spark. So you find 1 or 2 people who may carry that forward, then that's how, all the krantis happen, right? All the revolution.
Believing in it and taking
Yeah,
it.
slowly by slowly by slowly you have to create that.
A question for the group. Is it difficult to talk about Hinduism with your other friends? Or?
I believe it is. That's the feedback we are getting from
I
everyone.
would agree, only because everyone has a different level of comfort with it. A lot of people
Well, there are 2 things, right? There is one that there is different level of comfort among us. And there is second is that there is a lot of misconceptions about Hinduism in the outside world.
I feel that sometimes to give the proper representation of what I would want to would take either too long or just be very difficult to, because it's something that you experience, so it's sometimes very hard for me to explain it in a way that,
No, that's because you have not done studies, right? If you do study, there are certain basic canons that you can always share.
I think one of the reasons why I become really difficult to discuss Hinduism with certain people is because different modes of worship. Every other Hindu worships a different god, and when they're trying to preach about that, so is the one person going to listen to him or listen to you?
And I understand, right? But then still there are basic questions that come, right?
Yeah,
Why do Hindus don't eat beef, right?
yeah.
That's one very common question you will hear as a youth, right? Do you believe in multiple gods? Right? That's a very common question that you are asking. And you need to know the answers to those at least, right? That we do not believe in multiple gods, but we accept many different manifestation of that divine, right? And you can even go beyond and say that we not only, if you are done with the time that
Yeah, there is an option.
Sure.
So now our class was until 3:30, right? So 3:30 to 6. At 6 o'clock we all have to come to main auditorium for a common Nadyog Sadhana and the evening lecture by Dr. Sir. But 3:30 to 6 is recreation. So you can go by the riverside or stuff like that. So there are 2 options. Either you can stay here and see your Vipul uncle, and if you want to go, then I will escort you how to reach there.
What about our luggage and our new rooms?
Yeah, I asked him.
Yeah.
And he said that'll happen in the next hour or so.
So should we
Or
go
should
there?
we not?
Huh?
Should we wait for that to be adjusted first and then go, or?
I have no clue.
make your own judgment, right? But you have to take care of your luggage before 6. That's how I see it.
No, it will be safe here.
It will be safe here, but I think you have to come back. If you go now, you have to come back before 6 so that you can move your luggage. Or
We'll probably
Yeah.
need your luggage to go in water to meet them there too. Paddle a little, if we're going to water.
well, then I think.